Hello, and welcome to Stephoodle. I am unsurprisingly Steph. And today is not Halloween. It is the 7th of November. I was trying to get this video done to be up for Halloween, but I didn't feel very well, and I was really anxious about the US election. And I was nice to myself and gave myself a couple of days off. So, sure, isn't Halloween right now? According to a calendar, no. Is it Halloween all the time in my heart? Yes, as evidenced by this meme that I posted to my Instagram stories this past week. Because Halloween is my favorite holiday. I love bats and cats and ghosts and pumpkins. Without further ado, I will cut back to October Steph, who recorded most of the audio for this video. Take it away, past me. This is the doll I made last year for Halloween. Her name is Agatha, and she's a ghost. I made her out of a Ghouls Alive Spectra so she can do this. It's pretty neat, although she can't really pose or anything, so she just kind of haunts forever. Poor Agatha. Anyway, this year I'm sticking to the same theme, I guess, in a way. Over the last year, I've been playing a bunch of Pokémon, which is new for me. I used to watch the original cartoon back in the 90s, and I really liked it, but I never super got into the games until Sword and Shield. And I went for Shield because Shield has the Ghost Gym. Because I, of course, love ghost Pokemon. My favorites are generally Fairy, Psychic, or Ghost. Although my favorite Pokemon is actually a normal Pokemon. Because Bewear is amazing. I mean, look at this tiny Bewear and this tiny pumpkin. It's perfect. So today we're going to be making Litwick. And let's take a look at Litwick's Pokédex entry on Pokemon.com. Obviously, these change for different versions. Let's see, this one says, "The flame on its head keeps its body slightly warm. This Pokemon takes lost children by the hand to guide them into the spirit world." Honestly, that's what makes me love a lot of Pokemon is their Pokédex entries. The reason I love Bewear so much is because Bewear is known to hug people to death. So let's go ahead and make Litwick. I decided to use this Shoppies doll as my base. Yeah, so both you know and I know that this is not the doll in the thumbnail. So let's just sort of fast forward and we'll get to the good stuff. I ran into several issues with this version. Anyway, I was not happy with how she was turning out, so I decided to put her aside and look at my other options. So let's just put her over there. Taking a look at my stock box, I noticed I had this Hairdorables Hairmazing Bella. So I thought that would be fun, but her body is way too gangly and tall. So I thought I would rebody her onto this Snapstar body. So let's heat up the heads with a hairdryer to soften the vinyl and yank those off and see what we're working with. Now, because those neck pegs are pretty different, we're gonna have to move it to the power tools pretty much straight out. As we all know, say it with me, be an adult, use the proper protective gear, take care of yourself, don't do anything stupid. Now as you can see, the Hairmazing neck peg has a teeny tiny little actual movable neck peg on it, whereas the Snapstars is just like a solid chonk. So what I'm gonna do to facilitate swapping that head over is actually just chop the necks off and swap them around. And hopefully that'll work. We shall see. First I use the Dremel tool to cut the necks off of each doll. And then I drilled into the neck hole on the Snapstars body, and a little bit into the neck from the Hairmazing body. Please note, this was super dangerous for me to do. Probably should have been wearing gloves or something, so keep that in mind. Now I made those recesses so I could use a piece of bamboo skewer to sort of link the two bits of plastic together. So I mixed up a 2-part epoxy glue and put it into the hole where the neck was. Put in the bit of wooden skewer, and then jammed on the neck piece. Once that was secure, it was time for my new toy. I say toy, it's not a toy. My new sculpting material. I finally got Epoxy Sculpt, y'all. And you know, I always thought it was weird that other doll artists said that specifically was their favorite, like every video. But I get it now. I cannot go back to Milliput after this. It was so much more easy to work with. Smoothed out beautifully, took no time at all. And of course, once it was cured, I sanded it down to blend it in with the rest of the plastic around it. And I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. Now before I reattach the head, I really wanted to get the body painting done. At first I thought, because the epoxy clay and the skin tone wasn't that far off from each other, I thought I could go straight into the white paint. I was wrong. It didn't work. It didn't blend properly. So I went back and primed it with gray gesso. It's like a mid-tone gray. That way it brought all of the tones together and made it a little easier to paint later. So I painted the gesso on the body in sections, mainly starting on the torso and the thighs, and then working out to the arms and the legs. Once that was all dry, I went in with the white paint, and same again. I painted it in sections with the torso and the thighs first, and then the extremities. Once the white was done, I started adding a gradient with a sort of light grayish blue and a lavender color on the arms and the legs. It turned out having a watercolor effect, which I kind of liked because I wanted it to sort of look like she was running through dirt and stuff, but I guess spectral dirt? Seems legit. And once that was dry, I started sealing in the body with watered down Litwick matte varnish. Except later I noticed on the side of the bottle it said you shouldn't add water to it. So I added a couple more layers without it diluted. Lesson learned for next time. Now that the body's ready, let's start on the head. First, I cut off all her hair. It's actually pretty nice, so I'm gonna hang on to it and see if I can use it somewhere later. Then I used pure acetone to wipe off the face. Usually this is where I would scrape the rest of the plugs out of the head with a screwdriver through the neck hole, but the neck hole on this doll is so tiny, it would be impossible. Thankfully, I have plans for her head that involve me cutting it open, so I'll be able to get it out that way. My plan here is to cut out an oval on top of her head. Obviously remove all the plugs after I've done that. Then flip that oval over and reattach it to the head so it's sort of like a perfectly shaped divot. It will make more sense as we go along. Once I've removed all the hair, I shaved down the sides of that little oval piece so it'll fit a little bit better onto the head without sticking up too much. Before reattaching it to the head, however, I need to add some armature for the flame. I cut a length of wire, folded it in half, and twisted it so it became a little bit stronger. Then I used an awl to poke new holes for the wires to go through. And I wiggle it around a bit just to make sure the hole is wide enough. Pass the wires through the holes. Measure out to make sure the flame is about the right size I want it to be. And then I twist the wires together on the bottom and cut off the excess. And then I twist the wires on the top to form the flame shape. There we go. Then I wrap the wire in bandage tape to finish the armature. And I added a little super glue to the wire underneath just as some extra precaution. Then I sewed the head cap back on with 3 strands of white embroidery thread and a mattress needle, which is a semicircular needle, so it's curved. And that made it a lot easier to get through 3D shapes rather than working with fabric. It's really handy. I actually have it from back when I was doing bookbinding in university. Once everything is sewn up, before I tie it off, I go back and use the needle to help me tighten all of the stitches. Then I tie it off, and I added a little bit of super glue all around. I use a hairdryer to heat up the head so I can reattach it to the body, which turned out to be a mistake, but we'll see why later. Before I start sculpting, I draw some guidelines on the head with a white Posca pen, just so I know where all of her little hair floopies are gonna go. Floopy's not a word. Floopy is a very technical term. Then I get to sculpting. Now, if you've worked with epoxy sculpt before, you'll know that this head is gonna turn out to be really, really heavy. And you're correct. I should have used some other material underneath to help bulk up the area first before sculpting. I knew it was going to be heavy. I didn't realize just how heavy it was going to be, and I just wasn't sure what to use to bulk up the areas. So, lesson learned for me, but it's okay. She's just a little bit top heavy. And by a little bit, I mean a lot top heavy. She's very top heavy. Other than that, though, the epoxy sculpt was a dream to work with, especially after using super fine white milliput, which admittedly any white version of a clay like that is terrible to work with. I've heard the same of the white epoxy sculpt. It just gets so slippery and gummy and sticky, and ugh. But that's what I've had, and that's what I've been working with for a while. So to work with epoxy sculpt, it was just so much easier to manipulate. So even though it was a lot of sculpting, it was kind of a joy to work with, so I can, again, definitely understand why people call it their favorite. And here is also where I started running into some issues. Her head became more and more floppy the more I worked on it, because of course I was moving it around, and that neck peg is so tiny. It kind of gave her a little bit of bobblehead, and not just because of the weight. Once the sculpting is done and the epoxy is cured, I sanded it down using first coarse sandpaper and then finer and finer grit until it was smooth. And then I prepped her head the same way I did with the body, with the medium gray gesso. And then I moved on to the white paint. And this is when I started noticing a problem. I knew that if I could take off the head, finish working on it, and then put it back on, it would be better, but it was very much a risk, and I sort of hemmed and hawed over it. And against the advice of my partner, I decided to remove the head. And I'm sure it was gonna be fine. It's totally fine, right?
It was not fine.
So the neck broke, which had been a calculated risk. So instead of panicking, I simply superglued and repainted the neck and sealed it and everything. And it's a little bit ugly, but it's fine. Then I went back and finished painting the head white. Now before I start painting the color, I needed to test out some new materials first, so I knew at what point to add them. And that is Blue Lit, which is a glow-in-the-dark powder that glows blue, and Super Base, which is a matte medium. Both are from Culture Hustle. And to mix Lit, what you do is you take a little bit of the Super Base, a little bit of water, and a little bit of the powder. I think it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And then you mix that all up together until it's nice and smooth and uniform. So what I did here was I prepped a little piece of cardboard with my paint colors on it. I wanted to see if this would dry clear enough over the acrylics that I could just add it at the end, or if I would need to mix the Lit in with the acrylic paint itself rather than the medium. Alright, everything is dry. Let's see if it works. Yes. Oh, it looks so cool. Okay, so it looks like it did dry mostly clear. The color difference is not going to be noticeable, so I'm going to paint it over the top of my acrylic paint at the very end. So now I've moved on with shading with the paints. First adding that gray-blue color and then the purple, and trying to get gradients to work, and then I add white back in to highlight everything. It's a lot of pushing and pulling of values. Once everything was dry, I was able to spray it with 2 layers of Mr. Super Clear, and I could get to doing the face up, which is really like half a face up because she only got one eye. I start by sketching on the eye shape with a light blue pencil. And then I switch to yellow to draw out her iris and fill it in, and then I keep going from there. One thing I did notice is that for some reason, and I don't know why, my pastels would not stick to the painted surface. So that was the first time I've ever had that happen. But it wasn't too much of a loss this time since she doesn't really have a lot of blushing going on, but it was interesting nonetheless. I also noticed that my pencils didn't look as great on their own, but I was able to get enough down for a guideline to start out with before I started lifting pigments directly off of the pencils with a brush. I also went in with some of the acrylic paint as well from time to time to help make sure the eye whites stayed white and to add shadow around the eye with that blue-gray color because I wanted her to have sort of a sunken in, sleepy, shadowed eye like she hasn't gotten a lot of sleep. I don't usually use acrylics on a face up, mainly because I don't think I'm very good with a brush. I think I'm very heavy-handed. However, this face up I had to use a brush so much, and I did actually use acrylic paint, and it worked out pretty well. I mean, granted, her eye is huge, so that was helpful. I don't think I could do this on a Barbie head, but I'm less afraid of acrylics now, so maybe I'll try using them in my regular face-ups as well to help bring out more colors. I don't know, we'll see. Stay tuned. At one point she has a darker pupil, and while that looked cool in theory because I wanted to keep her eyelashes purple, it competed a bit too much, so I ended up pulling that back and making her eyes more yellow again, and I think that worked out a lot better. Like in my illustration, I added a big highlight in the upper right, and I decided to add a smaller one in the bottom left just because it felt like it needed a little more oomph, and I think that was the right decision. After another couple of coats of Mr. Super Clear, I mix up a slightly bigger batch of the lit and the super base together with a little bit of water, and I go to town. I gave the entire flame 2 coats, 2 very thin coats, and then gave that little bit in the center 2 more coats. And then it was time to reattach the head again. So I heated the head up with a hairdryer again, this time for almost 10 minutes. Like, I wanted that thing as flexible as I could get it. And it was still a nightmare to get back on. I had to squish that thing more than I felt comfortable. I knew from experience from getting the head off before that it was gonna come away from the hair at the back of the neck. And I wasn't too worried about that because it is a big chunk. It's not like a delicate piece of clay. I did get it back on, and that's great, but I would never remove one of these heads ever again. It's not worth it. Off camera, towards the beginning of this whole process, I made her this dress. I didn't hem the end of the sleeves or the bottom of the dress because I wanted to distress them. And I did that with some sandpaper, and I went in and tore bits of it, and it looked really cool. Then I dunked the dress in my water. Then I got some dioxazine purple watercolor paint, watered it down very heavily, and just sort of dabbed it onto the surface. And since the fabric is wet, it sort of pulls up that pigment. I actually saw this technique on one of Delightful's videos for Espeon, and I thought it would work really well here. And here's the result. Turned out pretty cool. I also have this ribbon to tie around her waist. I'm gonna distress the ends of that as well. And now we can get her dressed. Hello, it's November Steph again, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Despite the cursed nature of this doll and the many issues that I had, I really love her and I think she's adorable. What do you think of my take on Litwick? Also, what's your favorite Pokemon? And what Pokemon would you like to see me make in the future? Leave it in a comment down below. Please also follow me on Instagram @StephUdoll if you want to see more photos of the dolls I make, and you can go back and see all the ones I made before I started YouTube. Plus sometimes I post works in progress, or I'll put up polls in my Instagram stories to help me decide what to make next. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of what I do, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you can get notified the next time I post a video, which should be at the beginning of December. Until next time, bye!